So Iran says the US broke the ceasefire and claims that Iran violated the MOU of propaganda, but the US blames Iran for violations in Hormuz. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has called Iranian control of the waterway illegal, unlawful, and unacceptable. Many legal experts have said the same about the US-Israeli initial strikes on Iran. Those paying much of the price are Gulf states that insist this is not their fight. Sirens sounded in Bahrain this morning for the fourth time in 24 hours as Jordan said it neutralised 5 Iranian drones. Kuwait is facing desalination and power plants on fire. And where is Israel in all this? The US's co-initiator has been sidelined by Washington in negotiations, and though Iran's strikes edge closer, Tehran is still opting to strike its neighbours over the state that actually helped launch this war. So what was Washington's role in the ceasefire collapse? Why are they keeping Israel out? And how long before Gulf allies get dragged in? I'm joined now by Senior Fellow at the Middle East Institute, Ross Harrison. Ross, welcome to MEE Live. You saw this coming. You warned back in March that diplomacy was masking hardline positions and escalation was coming. Talk us through those hardline positions on both sides. We touched on the IRGC in the previous interview. Dr. Izadi didn't seem to think that the hardline forces were much of a force in Iran. What do you think? And talk to us about the US as well.
Well, I mean, the internal dynamics within the regime in Iran right now are difficult to discern. One thing I can tell you is that under the previous supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, there was much more of an adjudicated kind of a process where the Ali Khamenei would take the hardliner position and take the more what we call the more pragmatist position and make a decision. Because under the crucible of war, the system has become much more of a consensual system. Now, when I say consensual, it doesn't mean that there aren't hardliners and that there aren't pragmatists. But basically, in terms of the decision-making apparatus, at least as far as we can see, it's a fairly consensual system. My expectation would be that you will see further divisions and factions emerge after the war. You see them now, but in terms of the ability to make clear decisions, it appears to us that we can actually see decision-making that's made collaboratively as opposed to being made by one person, the supreme leader. That's number one. Number two, on the U.S. side, in terms of a hardline position, I wouldn't call it a hardline position. I would call it an unrealistic position that the United States has not brought to bear all of the expertise that exists here in Washington on Iran, on the nuclear file. And that from the very beginning, the United States' view of Iran was a flawed view. It was a flawed view in terms of the resilience of the regime in Tehran. It was a flawed view in terms of the ability for massive military means to achieve unrealistic political objectives. So I think right now the look at this as hardliners in Washington versus hardliners in Tehran, I'm not sure that's the right way to look at it.
Thank you. And if you were advising Washington right now, right, if Washington was doing a better job at capitalizing on the expertise available to it, how would you advise Washington? Is there a realistic off-ramp? And what would it cost the US to take it?
Well, remember, I think there's an asymmetry in terms of the goals of each side. So on the Iranian side, this is about survival. They don't have a plan B. For the Iranian side, they believe that if they don't leave this conflict, having reestablished deterrence that they believe they lost last year during the 12-day war, then they will just have, this will be an invitation for further conflict in the future. So for them, there is no plan B. Washington has options, but obviously no real great options. Remember, one of the things that the Iranians have done is they've effectively put Donald Trump in an escalation trap where he can escalate, which is what you're seeing now, but with no clear political achievements through that escalation. And if he de-escalates, or if he didn't try to renegotiate the MOU, which clearly advantaged the Iranians, if he did not try to renegotiate that MOU, then he was perceived as being weak and having a deal that's no better, perhaps worse than Barack Obama had in 2015 with the JCPOA. So I think the exit ramp now, there are exit ramps available for moving from where we are today through a diplomatic track. But if the more complex this conflict becomes, then the difficulty will be that the decision makers lose control of the escalation dynamics. One of the things that we have seen is that the United States accepted the MOU, which gave the Iranians many advantages. And the Iranians right now have been trying to consolidate and sustain those advantages, including their position in the Strait of Hormuz. What the Americans have been trying to do, they were relying on renegotiating the terms of the MOU. And since they couldn't do it in the negotiating room, they went to the battlefield. So I think what's going to happen is both parties have to believe that they have more to lose on the battlefield than they do in the negotiating table. And right now, it's not clear to me that message exists either in Tehran or in Washington.
At what point does a war become a forever war? Is this one?
Well, forever wars occur when there's really no clear exit ramps. And I think when you get to a point where the decision makers in Washington or in Tehran lose control, because now you'll have the Houthis involved, you'll have Lebanon as part of the file, Iraq potentially. You have an escalation dynamic that is beyond the control of the actor. I will tell you that if you think about historical parallels here, Richard Nixon, the president that most of your viewers don't remember, but he ran on a campaign in 1968 on ending the Vietnam War. That Vietnam War ended 5 years later. So I think the danger here is that the United States is now getting deeper into a conflict for which there is no clear exit. Listen, I think the problem here is that this cannot become a frozen conflict. There are too many dynamics and interests at stake. On the Iranian side are concerned that this conflict the status quo would be frozen in time and that they will lose leverage through that. And the United States really can't sustain a forever war because of the economic cost and ultimately the political cost. So I don't think the danger here is a frozen conflict. I think it's much more of an out-of-control escalation.
Okay. So at risk of being a forever war, but potentially could be brought back from the brink still.
We hope. And I think we're on a knife's edge now, but I'm not sure how long that knife's edge we can stay on that knife edge without falling over on one side or the other.
Now, Israel has been sidelined by Washington, and Iran has notably not been striking Israel. But last night's attempted strikes on Jordan edged closer. What does it tell us that the US is keeping its closest ally out? And does sidelining Israel make the deal more achievable, or does it just defer an Israeli reckoning with Iran later on?
No, I do not think that Jerusalem will consider a freelancing kind of initiative to go attack Iran without the United States. I don't see that happening. And I think the way you framed your question, which is why has the United States sidelined Jerusalem, I don't think Jerusalem actually is egging for contributing further to this conflict at this moment. They are happy that the status quo that the status quo of the MOU is being undermined, but they're not necessarily egging to become part of this conflict. I don't think they believe they can gain anything from that. So I think it's both the U.S. saying that they're trying to control the dynamic. If Israel enters the dynamic, then you perhaps blow up what the dynamic, the MOU or the agreement between Lebanon and the United States and Israel, and you make it much more difficult to disentangle in the negotiating table. So I think it's both Jerusalem and Washington that have agreed that at this point in time, the Israelis are not going to be directly involved in the kinetic campaign.
There was a statement made by Smotrich that just was published today to a domestic audience at a settlement event along the lines of why fight? Why not just let the US fight Israel's fight for it? I suppose that's sort of right. What you're getting at. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ross Harrison, thank you so much for joining us here on MEE Live today. Now, with US-Iranian tensions resurging, Iranian leadership has come under fire, and it's not just from rivals overseas. On Monday, Iran's president called for unity, collective decision-making, and coordination among all state institutions. Masoud Pezeshkian is a 71-year-old heart surgeon who became Iran's president in 2024. Unaffiliated with any political party, he's described as a reformist by some and a hardliner by others. So who is Iran's president, and what does he stand for? MEE's Carolina Pedrazzi reports.
Who is Masoud Pezeshkian, Iran's 71-year-old heart surgeon president? When Israeli-American strikes killed Iran's supreme leader in February, for 8 days, a three-man council held his powers. These are the Chief Justice, a senior cleric, and the country's president, a 71-year-old heart surgeon, Masoud Pezeshkian.
جمهوری اسلامی ایران خونخواهی و انتقام از عاملین و آمرین این جنایت تاریخی را وظیفه و حق مشروع خود می‌داند و با تمام توان خود به تحقق این مسئولیت و تکلیف بزرگ خواهد پرداخت.
Pezeshkian's political career is unconventional, especially given his medical studies and non-affiliation with any political party. Labeled at times as a reformist, other times as a hardliner, the heart surgeon was elected president in 2024. But who is he? Born in 1954 in the Iranian province of West Azerbaijan, Pezeshkian comes from Azeri and Kurdish parents, growing up in one of Iran's most ethnically layered regions. In 1973, he was drafted for military service in the southeastern town of Zabul. It was there that he first became drawn to medicine, although his surname, Pezeshk, meaning doctor in Farsi, shows his family came already from a lineage of physicians. He started attending the Tabriz University of Medical Sciences in the mid-70s and later specialized in cardiac surgery. Throughout his studies, when war broke out with Iraq in 1980, Pezeshkian went to the front lines, organizing medical teams and treating wounded soldiers directly for 8 years. Eventually, in 1994, he became the president of Tabriz University. However, that year was not one marked by celebration, as his wife, a gynecologist, and one of his children were killed in a car accident in which Pezeshkian and his other children survived. He never remarried, raising his 2 sons and a daughter alone. In 1997, Pezeshkian entered politics, joining reformist president Mohammad Khatami's government as deputy health minister. By 2001, he was health minister until 2005, expanding rural health insurance to nearly 25 million Iranians. He entered parliament in 2006, representing the region of Tabriz, and would be re-elected 4 more times over the next 2 decades, eventually becoming first deputy speaker. His position regarding state crackdowns on protest has evolved over time. In 2009, during the Green Movement demonstrations, he criticized the way protesters had been treated, quoting Ali bin Abi Talib.
مردم برای مردم مثل یک حیوان وحشی نباش که به جونشون بیفتی و لط و پارشون بکنی. فانهم صنفان، این مردم 2 دستن، اما اخ لک فی الدین اما نذیر لک فی الخلق. یا برادر دینی تا این خطاب با تو برابرم. یفرط منهم الزلل و تعرض لهم العلل و یعطى علی ایدیهم فی الامن والخطا. گرفتار میشن، مشکل دارن، خطا میکنن، عمدن و یا سهوا. حاتم من عفوک و صفحک. بگذر از اینا، با رحمت و گذشت با اینا برخورد کن.
This was an instance of rare rebuke from inside the system, which he repeated in 2022 during the protests following the killing of Mahsa Amini, who was detained by Iran's guidance patrols.
همه باید بیان پاسخ بدن، نه اینکه برن اون دختر رو بگیرن کتک بزنن و بعد مثلا برنامه درست بشه که جنازه‌شو تحویل بدیم. بعدم نمی‌ایم شفاف سازی بکنیم، هی بگیم آقا اینجوریه. از نظر پزشکی
And after the protests at the beginning of this year, he made conciliatory remarks, accusing the West of interference, but still addressing the Iranian people's grief. He also admitted that when he was the president of Tabriz University, he had tried to impose mandatory hijab. Pezeshkian tried for the presidency twice before making it. First in 2013, but he withdrew, and in 2021, but was disqualified. His moment came only in May 2024, when former President Ibrahim Raisi died in a helicopter crash, leading to sudden elections. As the sole reformist cleared to run, Pezeshkian took 53.7% of votes, beating hardliner Saeed Jalili. After his win, Pezeshkian was blunt about the limits of his office. Iran's real decisions, he said, instead rest with the supreme leader, whom he addresses with the titles of Excellency, despite reformist politicians in Iran usually addressing him just as leader. Pezeshkian took office promising economic relief and renewed talks with the West over Iran's nuclear program.
I hereby declare once more before this assembly that Iran has never sought and will never seek to build a nuclear bomb. We do not seek nuclear weapons. This is our belief based on the edict issued by the supreme leader and by religious authorities.
Pezeshkian had campaigned on re-engaging the West, but on the nuclear program itself, he held the same line as the rest of Iran's leadership, that Tehran wasn't building a bomb, but it would not give up its right to enrich uranium. Then, in March 2025, President Trump sent Khamenei a letter proposing new talks, backed by a 60-day deadline and the threat of military strikes if Iran refused. Indirect talks, mediated by Oman, opened in April 2025, described by both sides as constructive, but they collapsed in June after the IAEA found Iran in violation of its nuclear obligations, and Iran responded by announcing a third enrichment site. Then, when Israel launched the 12-day war, striking Iranian nuclear and military sites, reports also emerged that an assassination attempt had targeted Pezeshkian himself during the attack, which he survived.
You all bore witness that this past June, my country was subjected to a savage aggression in flagrant contravention of the most elementary principles of international law.
On 28 February 2026, the US and Israel launched a joint war on Iran, which immediately killed Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Under Iran's constitution, a provisional council was formed to run the country until Khamenei's son, Mojtaba Khamenei, was appointed. Pezeshkian, as sitting president, was one of its 3 members, alongside the chief justice and a senior cleric.
ترور عالی ترین مقام سیاسی جمهوری اسلامی ایران و زعیم و مرجع برجسته جهان تشیع توسط محور منحوس آمریکای صهیونی اعلام جنگ آشکار با مسلمانان خصوصاً شیعیان اقصا نقاط عالم محسوب می شود.
When Pezeshkian returned to the presidency, he had to lead a country now at open war, as its government became increasingly split between his office and the Revolutionary Guard, which appeared to have overruled the government's decisions. Continuing with his moderate, reconciliatory approach, Pezeshkian at one point issued a televised statement where he said,
من اینجا لازم از کشورهای همسایه که مورد حمله قرار گرفتن از طرف ایران و نیروهای مسلح ما قهرمانانی که دیگه وقتی فرماندهان نبودن آتش به اختیار تمام اون اقداماتی که لازم بود انجام دادن.
In June, he was negotiating directly with Washington. Indeed, it was Pezeshkian who signed the Memorandum of Understanding to end the fighting and reopen the strait with US President Donald Trump.